Well, so much for our fall weather. Yeah, blowing and drifting snow, more snow coming. Yeah, it's going to be a great day. Welcome back to the farm, everybody. Dave here with Dave's Old Iron. Coming to you from a beautiful Wednesday afternoon, the 20th of November 2024. The storm has kind of let up for a minute. We're supposed to have a couple more come through. So, got a few winterization things we need to get done today before it gets any worse. So, let's get started. My hometown is so small, we have a combined beauty shop and barber shop in town. Well, I walked in there one day and the nice lady standing there ready for a customer. I sat down in the chair, she put the paper around my neck and all that, and wanted to know what kind of a haircut I wanted. Well, not really knowing, I said, just make me look sexy. She turned around and started making herself a margarita. One of the first things we're going to do is get the new LS tractor winterized a little bit. Yeah. So, we're going to see if she starts. Oh yeah. That's the first time this tractor's been started in at least a month. While the LS is warming up, one of the things I need to do is move that little round hay baler back into that corner some if I can. That way I can at least get the LS in under the roof instead of having the roof drip snow right down on top of the hood in front of the windshield and on top of the fuel tank. The fuel tank is what we're going to be up to first. Now, one of the first things you want to do, especially if you have a diesel-powered machine, even if it sits all winter, is put a little anti-gel stuff in it. This happens to be Power Services diesel fuel supplement, which is an anti-freeze thing. They also make a 911 brand or version of this for when your diesel already is gelled. And believe me, folks, it doesn't matter. This isn't for a debate. Power Service versus Howes versus whatever other brand. They're all basically the same thing. They all do the same thing. The problem lies in how well one works over another, as whether or not the fuel's been treated before you get it, or what the fuel consists of. Okay, what I've done here on this bottle is I've measured out from the full, which is up here above this top mark, it's 8 spaces. That's equivalent to 8 fuel tanks on this particular tractor at 12 some gallons of fill up. Now, this is for just preventative treatment, and if it really super gets cold, I will dump in 2 lines worth of this particular product to keep the tanks from gelling up on me and not letting the tractor run. Because I do plan on using this machine this winter to move snow, should we get a lot of snow, which it sounds like we might get some more here in the next day or so. Normally the ideal way to blend this up and mix it is by putting it in the fuel tank, your little gas can, and let's see, where are we at here? Yeah, we're down just a hair below, right at that first mark, so that's good. That's right where we need to be. So ideally I should have dumped some in this jug before I filled it up with diesel. That would help stir it up and mix it up. Unfortunately, I didn't get that done. Winter caught up on me too quick. So what we're going to do is let the tractor run for a little bit today, because as you well know, any of you that have diesels know there's a return line. So what the pump doesn't inject or push through the injectors into the cylinders to fire gets run back into the fuel tank. So that's why we're going to do it this way this time, is hopefully that'll circulate and keep the diesel from gelling up. Now, of utmost importance, you must remember to keep all of your fuel tanks in all of your old iron or new iron full during the winter time. Reason being is there's this heating and cooling in the mornings when it warms up to the daytime highs, and then in the evenings it cools off to the overnight lows. Now, this is a problem for fuel tanks that are not full. The fuel tanks breathe. I've mentioned this before. They breathe air in and out. Vent caps, you're familiar with that. Okay, so what you need to do is make sure you keep your fuel tank, whether it be diesel or gasoline, as full as you can possibly keep it through the entire winter. Even if you're not planning on running the machine, keep it full. Especially if you're running gasoline with ethanol in it, because alcohol attracts water. One other point to keep in mind is to keep your non-machine or tractor or car or whatever fuel tank full. Whether it be one of the little red gas cans or a yellow one for diesel fuel, or just a 500-gallon tank at your farm, keep it full during the winter, as full as you can, because of that expansion and contraction of the air that goes on inside those fuel tanks. In the daytime, it warms up, pushes air out because the fuel expands. The air expands, and in the evening, it cools off and it sucks in that cool, moist air. Then you have water issues in your fuel, whether it be gas or diesel. Now here's a little bit of worthless trivia. Well, maybe not worthless to some, but from my days back delivering fuel and dealing with motor oils and lubricants and that sort of thing, in which I spent about 16 years doing, I can tell you for a fact that the reason they get, or how they get, ultra low sulfur diesel fuel these days is by injecting it through a stream of water under high pressure. The water's separated out supposedly, but you can still get water in your diesel fuel. And if you get a thin layer of water going on between the tank, whether it be handheld or on a vehicle, machine, whatever, and the diesel fuel, if you get that thin layer going on in there, it'll create a algae or bacteria growth in there, because there is less sulfur in your diesel fuel to kill that stuff. So there are things on the market called biocides that you can dump in your diesel tank to keep that stuff out of your tank. And it's probably a good idea to maybe dump some of that in your fuel tanks on high hour machines at least once a year to get rid of that out of the diesel fuel tanks. Some of you have heard about it. Kind of gets a black sewer smelly sludge that grows inside your fuel filter, and that plugs up your filter, your tractor loses power, it comes to a stop. So yeah, you might want to treat for that at least once a year. And as for the ethanol blended gasoline, that's all I run in all of my tractors year round. The thing that saves me is keeping those fuel tanks full so they don't attract water, because alcohol and water do mix. And with the modern fuel of gasoline that they have these days, it's more man-made chemicals than it is petroleum oil. You get a reaction going on between those chemicals in the gasoline and the alcohol contaminated with water. That's where all the problem comes from, folks. It's not ethanol fuel, it's that contamination and letting it sit. So if you're running your tractor every 2 weeks doing field work or whatever, and you got a gas-powered machine, don't worry about running ethanol fuel in it. You'll be fine. But in the wintertime, remember to keep your fuel tanks full. And when you're running your equipment that's gasoline powered, before you stop it for the week or day or whatever, while the engine's running, reach down there and shut off your fuel valve on sediment bulb or an inline valve, whatever you have that shuts the fuel off to the carburetor. Let that carburetor run dry of fuel, and don't forget to turn the ignition switch off after you've done so. Not so necessarily important on a magneto, because it isn't going to fire if the engine isn't running. But if you have a battery-powered system with a distributor, don't forget to shut the key off or turn the switch off to kill the power, so you don't run down your battery, which is another topic we have coming up. Archaeologists have finally discovered what the oldest known computer was in the world. It is an apple, and it was owned by Adam and Eve. And just one bite caused it to crash. Now here's something else to not forget to do while the weather is half decent and you got time, is grease all of your pivot pins. and your axle housings and whatever has a grease nipple on it, get it some grease while you can. Now if you're having issues like I am with grease being cold and stiff, say the spring isn't pushing that handle back, I have to pull it back. It is squirting grease into the fitting, but if you're having issues like that, don't change your grease. Well, I should say, don't change your grease brand. If you see this says NLGI, National Lube Grease Institute, whatever it is, number 2. That's thicker stuff. So if you can, with your same brand, same type of grease you're running, see if you can find a NLGI grade number 1. It'll pump easier into your fittings, plus it'll still lubricate your bearing surfaces while it's super cold out. So yeah, remember that. And I'll show you a picture of what they look like now. This isn't normal. Some of them are in a little square box. This is what it looks like. And remember, don't use the cheap stuff that you don't know anything about, except in places where it's a zero speed bearing, okay, like loader pins, that sort of thing. Don't use it in wheel bearings or something like that, especially you don't know where it came from and what it's made out of. Usually anything with a lithium or lithium complex in it, it's okay stuff. Moly, yeah, that's more for high load stuff. So yeah. Another thing to consider is rear wheel weighting. Yeah, especially if you're moving heavy wet snow with a front end loader. Most tire shops were going to want to sell you something called magnesium chloride. It's a liquid that they put in the tires to act as ballast or to help hold down the back end of the tractor when you're loading something heavy on the front end. Keeps the tractor from nosing over. Well, I would suggest you don't do the magnesium chloride. If you do use magnesium chloride, you could end up with a rim like what's here on the back end of this little Farmall BN. Well, maybe not quite that bad. What happens is the magnesium chloride will leak out of the tube and it finds its first hole to escape from out of the tire and rim. And that's usually around the valve stem. So you end up with something that looks like this. So the preferred thing to do, instead of using the magnesium chloride anti-gel fluid in your rear tires, is the cast iron wheel weights. If you can't find those, or they're too cost prohibitive to buy because they're rare or whatever, try to find somebody selling beet juice, as in the juice from sugar beets. Apparently it doesn't rust out the rims as badly, it doesn't corrode them because it's not an alkali or whatever. Either that or barrels of the blue window washer fluid. Yeah, that's mostly water, but it has been mixed with alcohol to keep it from freezing. Yeah, so try that. And because I didn't want my rims to look like those other rims, I opted not to have the tires filled to about here with that magnesium chloride, beet juice, or window washer fluid. And rear wheel weights may or may not be available for these rims. So what did I do instead? Something you can do too if you have a 3-point hitch. You can purchase one of these rear weights that hang off your 3-point hitch arms, like this one does. It has a little door in the back right there. You can lift it up to drain the weight out of it if you want to. My tractor's lift arms won't go down low enough to set this thing on the ground, that's okay with me. I'd set it down on top of these old cinder blocks to give it the height that I need. Plus, when I got it mounted, I can throw them in that box for a little more extra weight. And what do I have inside of there? Well, if we get down in here, yeah, some crushed gravel. These little weight boxes can be found on eBay, Amazon, just about anywhere. This one happens to be an 800-pounder for a Category 1. Yeah, should have got the bigger one for this tractor and the amount that it can lift. This is more for like those subcompact jobs. Old age comes at absolutely the wrong time, because by the time you start to know everything, you start to forget everything you knew. Yeah. If you're not fortunate like I am to have a nice indoor shop or storage facility to place your tractors in the wintertime, don't forget to cover all of the openings that are exposed. Like this air cap right here is for the air intake on this WD-45 Allis-Chalmers tractor. Usually you'll have something like that, big round thing like on some of the early Farmalls, or even something with a glass jar on it. That's fine for the intake, to keep that covered. If not, you have to do like what I've done here on the exhaust pipe on this WD-45. That's put a soup can over the top of that, keep moisture from running down inside of there. You are going to get humidity in there just from the air going in and out, but you're not going to get water actually down inside of there to cause problems in the engine. With any luck, knock on some wood. But as long as you have something covering your openings, you should be okay. Now, something else to consider on these older tractors. If you're like me, most of us or some of us run straight 30 weight in the summertime, which is fine. That's probably what the old tractor called for in the first place if you read the owner's manual. However, with modern oils the way they are these days, I wouldn't hesitate switching up to a 1040 for the summertime, because that 40 number designates its ability to be able to be used at a higher ambient air temperature. Or, as in the case of like Stinky here, a 10W30, because the 10 is the lower, colder temperature rating where the oil still flows and performs its best. Now, if you're in the really northern countries, northern Minnesota, Canada, that sort of thing, you might want to even consider going to a 530 in these old gas engines if you're going to run them in the wintertime moving snow or whatever. Now, that's something else to consider too, folks. Fall is an excellent time to change your oil in your engine, because any engine, gas or diesel, is going to put contaminants into the oil that are acidic, corrosive, whatever, and basically will do your engine harm. So it's a good time in the fall to change out the oil that you've been running in it all summer. So you might as well change it to a lighter weight oil as well for the wintertime. Most people forget to change out the oil that's in the oil bath cup for the oil bath air filter on these older tractors. Yeah, it's easy to do, folks. You just unhook these snaps on the sides. This bowl drops off. It's full of oil, so be careful that you don't spill it all over everything. And there's usually a line on here, somewhere about in here on those. I think it's on this and it's on the back side. Anyway, that's your full mark. That's how full you fill it. And you want to use the same oil in this as you do in the engine. But don't forget to change this every fall and clean it out, or the bottom of it is going to rust through from moisture and dirt and stuff from getting down here in the bottom of that. So yeah, change that out, or you're going to be hunting for a new air filter cup. Here's something else to consider doing. See that gap right there around that rubber on your gear shift lever? Yeah, that's letting water get into the transmission. Any rain or snow was going to hit this and run down that right square into that. So then you end up with water in your gear oil. Or worse yet, you go to try to move the tractor, and that water in there is froze up, and the gears don't turn, and you end up breaking something. What I do to prevent the water from getting into the transmission of Stinky is I put a 5-gallon bucket over that gear shift lever. Plus, I put it in first gear, which is up and over to the left that way, which helps center the bucket over the starter switch button that you push down to activate the starter and the oil fill opening. Yeah, so this whole trio of stuff is covered by a bucket when I put that up like that in first gear. Yeah, when it's just like that. So that's something else for you all to think about. Now, I mentioned batteries a bit ago, and this is what I do with my batteries. Again, I'm not telling you what to do. This is what I do. And if you want to follow my ideas, go right ahead. This is not the forum for conversation about what weight of oil is best, what brand of oil is best, what you should or shouldn't do with batteries, that sort of thing, okay? This is just what I do. On tractors that I'm not using all winter, I at least disconnect the battery cables off of the terminals off the batteries. At most, I will leave a battery maintainer attached to the batteries as long as I have a surge protected outlet of some sort. And I'm not talking a GCFI with the little push buttons. I'm talking a surge protector outlet. Now, GCFI or GFCI, whatever it is, outlet is a great idea, especially if you have a battery maintainer plugged into something. That's a good place to put it. That way, in case there's a short circuit in the battery maintainer, say like you're thrifty like I am and you buy one at Hobo Freight, yeah, in case it catches fire, burns up, shorts out, or whatever, it'll trip that breaker in the outlet. But a surge protector prevents surges from damaging your electronics. What it is basically like a capacitor, absorbs that initial shock of the power coming on. So if you're in an area prone to having power failures in the wintertime, it's a darn good idea to put a surge protector on that battery maintainer or charger, whichever you're using, just to keep it safe. Now, for what I do with my batteries is I will literally pick them up out of the tractor and take them into the basement of the old farmhouse. It doesn't freeze down there, but yet it gets cool and that sort of thing. Now, you have to be careful if you're taking batteries into a structure and you're putting them on a battery maintainer or a charger. Batteries generate a hydrogen gas. It's a very explosive. Remember the Zeppelin? Yeah, Hindenburg, poof. Yeah, same thing with the hydrogen gas that comes out of a battery when you have it on a charger. So do make certain you have no open flames or sparks being generated around those batteries that are on the charger. Well, around the batteries in general, period. Yeah. Another thing that helps you preserve your tractor for future use, and it's kind of a pain, but it is to jack the tractor up and put it on blocks. In other words, to keep the rubber tires from holding up the weight of the tractor all winter. That's a good way to cause cracks in the sidewalls and flat spots in the tread, especially on the older tires that are a nylon ply or something that are a bias tire. You may have experienced that. You start going down the road, and you start bouncing, especially if you're on a hard surface. That's what happens. So if you can, jack your tractor up, put them up on blocks for the winter. Even with your implements, if you got some that are down on the ground, yeah, like a rubber-tired potato planter or something like that, get it up off the ground, put it up on blocks, save those tires, because you know as well as I do, those old implement tires as well as the tractor tires are getting blooming expensive. In fact, 30 years ago, it was cheaper to buy a tractor with rubber tires on it and replace the rubber tires than it was to buy a tractor that was older with steel wheels on it. Now, the opposite's true now. The steel-wheeled tractors are sometimes, depending on make and model, a little less expensive to own and operate than they are with the rubber tires because of the cost of buying those tires new. And the very last thing before I go is your clutch pedal. If you have a tractor that's going to sit for any good amount of time with a pedal to activate the clutch, put a block or something on there between the seat and that pedal so that the pedal is depressed. That way, in case something happens, you got oil in there or whatever, your clutch disc won't stick to the pressure plate and it won't stick to the flywheel, because getting that apart is a real bugger. And it's often easier to change out that clutch throwout spring than it is taking the tractor apart in half and changing out a clutch. Yeah. So keep that in mind too. And one last very important thing that all of us should have around our farm, our home, our shop, our workspace, whatever it is a working fire extinguisher. Unlike this one, which is covered in cobwebs and whatnot, it still shows a charge. But I did learn a trick from a fire extinguisher company that refills them and services them and maintains them. You need to keep them clean. Check the nozzle, make sure there's no spiders building a nest inside of there, because stuff won't come out if there is. And to turn your fire extinguishers upside down and wrap them a half a dozen times with a good heavy rubber-headed hammer on the bottom to stir up all that powder and stuff that's loose inside of there, because if it sits too long right side up, that stuff settles to the bottom and becomes a cake in the bottom of the extinguisher, and it won't come out the nozzle. It'll just sit in there, and all your pressurized gases will come out that's supposed to push out that stuff. So yeah, make sure your fire extinguishers are in good working order and not covered in cobwebs like this one. Yeah. So find your local fire extinguisher service company, have them come check all yours, and maybe make a suggestion on if you need a different type in a certain area, like around the kitchen where you have grease fires, or an electrical version around your electric panels in your shop or shed or whatever. So yeah, good idea to be checking on these as well. Now, one last thing before we wrap up today's video. With Thanksgiving coming up, I got one for you. Where do deviled eggs come from? Any ideas? Wicked chickens, of course. Yeah, it could be a leftover Halloween joke too. Yeah. Well, that's going to do it from a cold, snowy, blustery southern Idaho today at Nelson Creek Farms. And yeah, it's getting dark. Time to call it quits for the day. I'd like to take a second to thank all of you that are the new subscribers to the channel, and all those of you that have stuck with me for a while now. Really means a lot. And I hope to keep the channel growing with your folks' support. So thank you again for all the new subscribers. Anyway, I'm going to call it good for today. Time to go in and get warmed up. So y'all be careful out there, and if I don't see you between now and Thanksgiving, y'all have a good turkey day and don't choke on any of the bones. Anyway, I'm Dave, wishing you well. Bye-bye for now.